2019. And we're going to, hang on here. My screens are still acting weird on my side. So I'm just going to have to roll with it. We're going to look at some 2020, some data from 2020, some real-time updates, and we're going to look at some benchmark data from 2019 as well. So I'm going to start real quick here and take you through a quick little flyover of our rebrand here and what we did. So our name, Travel Tacoma Mount Rainier. We don't usually say the whole mouthful, tourism sports. It's just kind of has to fit in the title. And this image that you're seeing on your screen here, the Mountain City Sea, has become kind of our benchmark calling card that we kind of launch everything from. And this is actually something, some language and imagery that we created when I was at the Sports Commission and carried it over into the travel side to a broader audience. It was very, very successful for us in the Sports Commission, both to our partners, to the business we were developing, and to our constituents. We serve a big area. We serve all of Pierce County. There's 23 cities in Pierce County, and this platform made room for everybody. It gave us room to let everybody have a place for their voice in the geographic diversity that represents us. And so in the naming, what we wanted to do was take advantage of given the two biggest equitable names to quickly identify the area. So when we say Travel Tacoma Mount Rainier, we're trying to get the person who lives the farthest away from here to most quickly identify with the region by our two biggest known assets, a national park, Mount Rainier, and of course, Tacoma. The Mountain City Sea, as I mentioned, makes room for everyone. And the big three, what we call the big three here, the Mountain City Sea, is a really rare attribute, right? There's very, very few markets that have this much geographic diversity compressed into such a tight footprint in the United States, at least. And, as we like to remind people, from the summit of Mount Rainier to the saltwater of Commencement Bay, it's only 42 miles as a straight line. And so there's a lot of stories and a lot of things that happen between these waters and the mountain, and all the communities and the rivers and the forests and the valleys that make up this zone. So we're thankful and blessed for that, and it makes it fun to talk about. So I'm going to switch gears now and jump right into business here and help you understand first our priorities and what we do. As I like to remind everybody, with any budget, you can't be all things to everyone. So the committees that govern the funding that drives tourism across Pierce County have established some priorities on the return on investment for tourism investment, as it would be. Sorry, more screen problems. So understanding those priorities, we're going to talk today about kind of the two big channels that we face. So we're as a B2B brand, Travel Tacoma is primarily a business-to-business DMO. DMO means Destination Marketing Organization. Our main course of liability is toward group business development and support. That means that the bulk of our work is pointed at attracting new business and recurring business when possible that brings groups with incremental and measurable gains in hotel room nights. The B2C side, that's the leisure level consumer side, and that's individuals. And that segment is always a DMO's most challenging because the ROI is the hardest to measure. Real easy to waste a lot of money in that segment and not get a return. So as such, those investments are a little more cautious. And of course, the pandemic has shaken up this market and replaced it with a portion of what we call hyperlocal staycation business that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But that's going to be something that transitions rapidly and as restrictions ease and consumer confidence increases. Some keywords to know about us. Hotel room nights is number one. So the work we do, really everything, that's the first gateway we have to pass. So tourism here, successful tourism is defined as the first metric, the first gas gauge being hotel room night generation. And that's adopted by the funding committees that drive this, and we follow that. Economic impact follows, of course. And then we want to let you know what a visitor defined is, and that is someone who travels into the area from outside of 50 miles or out of state. That is the legal definition of it. Our focus is, of course, the overnight visitor first. So we want that person to come in from outside of 50 miles and stay. And I want to talk about our pillars of development. And there's basically three, and that's conventions and meetings, which is a group type of business. Amateur sports, also a group type business. And then the leisure travel, which is an individual business. going to take you now through, and I'm going to show you some data. Don't let your eyes roll back in your head. I promise this is going to be interesting data because I want you to see we're going to give you some samples of how behind our curtain of what kind of steers is here a little bit. Okay. This isn't everything. This is just some interesting samples. So this here is a map of the United States. You might recognize that. We live here. and all these little glowing dots represent where our travelers come from. So in 2019, we had 7.5 million people visit Pierce County. And we can talk separately about how that information is tracked. It's brought in through a variety of pieces of information, but it's extremely accurate. And I'm gonna take this same information and show it to you in a few different ways. This map is kind of overwhelming to see, and it certainly props up and supports the fact that we're a very national market and we get people from everywhere here. We will see as we break this down a little bit that, of course, we're a regional market first. So this map here that you're looking at will show you by percent what the amount of travelers from the states they come from. And there's some color coding to this that kind of ranks them in priority. You can see obviously that Oregon, our neighbor, we get the most traffic from those folks. I'm going to show you this again as another breakdown here. This is a breakdown. This is for 2019 through the months of the year, and the different color bands represent the different states and the visual volume of the visitors that come from those states. I threw some labels over them so that you could see real quick, Oregon, California, Idaho, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, those being the top states. And then below that, it's kind of like sedimentary rock. It gets into thin layers of slices from all across the country. But those are the states that drive the most volume of visitors into Pierce County through the course of the year. This is a really fun graph I wanted to show you. This represents, again, looking at 2019, and I'm talking a lot of 2019 data here because it's a benchmark. It's where we have to get back to as we go toward recovery. So it's a firm number. We have really good control on this data, and this is how we're going to measure when we've made our returns. But this graph here shows Pierce County as a whole. And all these different lines represent different assets and attractions that we monitor through the course of time, and shows their volume of travel. This is weekly activity of unique visitors into certain areas. And I've just highlighted 3 on here that stand out. Obviously, the big red line is the Mount Rainier season, and you can follow its peak right up into the wildflower bloom into the late time of the year. It is Pierce County's dominant tourism driver. We know this anecdotally. We all know this. We've probably heard some numbers on it, but this might be the first time you've ever seen it in a graph compared to the other areas around the county. That second, the highest one there, the green line that bobbles up and down, that is downtown Tacoma. And that captures like the Tacoma Dome and downtown vicinity specifically. It stops at the edge of downtown. And then I threw a little, you'll see in purple there, it says any guesses what that little purple blip is. You'll see it rises there in late August and September. And I'll give you a hint. It also shows up earlier in the year back toward the spring. And if you guessed the fairgrounds, that's what that blip would be. So everything else falls under there. But I wanted to kind of show you some of the highlights of the county. Demographic information. We're pretty evenly split in terms of gender, male, female, families. Average, we're a Gen X group primarily, age 45 to 54, 50 to 75K income, and that's just a quick high-level snapshot of the prevalent demographic groups that come in here. This is also some fun data. One of the things we talk about in our work is compression. It's a word we use that not everybody understands. Compression is a word that means one demand generator is having a bigger impact on its area than immediately around itself. It is compressing out into other cities, towns, and markets because of its size. It is displacing people into other hotels, particularly, or into other resources. So this is an example of a visualization of that. This graph, what you're looking at here is the top orange line, the big one that's high, has a big peak and kind of rolls along there, is the annual attendance for, in this case, the convention center in downtown Tacoma. There were 141,019 visitors that were in the building that year. And below that, we can see all the other lines. They give us reading on what hotels or what region of hotels they stayed in. We have different areas defined by that. So 20 to 36% of those visitors at the convention center stayed in a downtown Tacoma or waterfront hotel. 17 to 25% stayed in a Hosmer area. 6 to 11 in a Fife area hotel. 4 to 10% in Puyallup. 3 to 7 in Lakewood. 3 to 6 in DuPont, and then a fraction down in all the way out to Sumner. So these are people that were, again, in the building, in the convention center, attached to a registered event there. They were then also attached to a registration in one of those hotels there. All right, this is another fun map. This is looking at Chambers Creek Regional Park, also the home of Chambers Bay Golf Course. This is during the summer months of 2019, June, July, and August. And this map shows us a visualization that totals 60,516 people who visited the park at that time. Just over 9,000 of those were from outside of 50 miles. The 7,200 of those 9,000 were from out of state. That's really interesting data, because it shows us that in state, it's not particularly during the summer months, it's not particularly a destination mind or a visit for in-state travelers, but it's got a big out-of-state hit. And when we really dig into that 7,200 number, we find that is golfers. So the golf course itself having an interesting demand on out-of-state players, but the park itself being more of a local asset. So some interesting perspective there. Continue to nurse this along. Okay, another thing here, and this will make a little more sense in a second, but I wanted to show you as far as Tacoma goes, because these are big attractions, big assets. The primary assets in Tacoma and their net gated totals for 2019. These are in round numbers. They're not perfect, but they're pretty close, within just a few percent. The punchline here is that over those venues, the zoo, the dome, Cheney Stadium, the museums, the arts district, the convention center, the total of 2.8 million people in a year through a gated facility. Okay, so they're counted, they're ticketed. So it's a good hard stamp number. We like really hard data. We really try to challenge estimates. When estimates come up, we want to try to get through that and get more toward a hard data number. So the two little arrows break out the Cheney Stadium and the museums, just so you can see those by name in there. But what I want to point out here is that's 2.8 million people, and this includes locals. This is everybody. This is just gated totals through those venues. Each of them having a different level of impact in terms of tourism. But that's 2.8 million people that went to almost zero in 2020. The amount of gated counts in the year, we still don't have that information yet, but I mean, it was horrific, right? I mean, most of these things were completely shut down or sparsely opened at limited capacities, staggering along. We got a couple of months of results in the beginning of the year before the pandemic hit, but it's a big number and it's a meaningful number. And this, you can do this in your own communities and look, if you've got gated venues and look, anywhere and really kind of get a sense of where some of the gaps are that have come from the pandemic. So we're going to switch now from this kind of 2019 kind of look and kind of, we have this benchmark. We saw, where volumes were and some interesting looks at some of the data there. We're gonna show some more of that as well as we talk about how bad 2020 was. But here's what was interesting. Here's what was kind of, I'd be cautious as I say this, because I want to say what was fascinating about what we learned from COVID. And it was that it's always been difficult for any consultant, any government, anybody to really, really define who a tourist is in any market in the country. there's only a couple of exceptions. Hawaii and Vegas are just about the only ones you can really put your arms around who that exactly is. But it's quite a bit difficult in other places. But when you shut down all the activities that are truly tourism generating, the attractions, the events, all those things, you really strip away tourism as we know it, you get to see how big the hole is that it leaves, and you can measure that. And we've been really interested in that so that we can figure out how to plug it, what it helps guide us in recovery. So I'm going to show you this graph here. And this is, so again, like I mentioned earlier, we start with hotels as the measuring stick, and then we build out from there. So this graph shows you three things, but we're really going to focus on two: the yellow line and the red line. The yellow line is 2019, it's hotel occupancy, and the red line is 2020. So you can see, and this is by week through the year. So just right away, you can see pretty clearly a gap. You can see in the red line, you can see when the pandemic hit clearly, big straight line drop right off there. And then you can actually, see a curve that still mimics the curve of the year. We all know that in Northwest, our 13-week window in the summer months is our prime, and the top of our curve is in that window when the season's really great. You're going to see this slide again later in the presentation, but the blue line happens to be where our recovery is at this point in terms of hotel rooms. I couldn't take that out in this part of the slide, but so you can see it twice. But here's another look at hotel occupancy, and this is Pierce County versus the national average. And Pierce County is the blue line. Here as I can navigate these slides. So we see 2019. We don't. By the way, the national average we didn't have complete year data on 2019. Just the data provider didn't have it. But we can see where the line went in 20, and again in the recovery as we go into 21. But we can see how we compared against the national. We performed significantly better than the national average in Pierce County, and we performed exponentially better than the state of Washington as a whole. Our hotels, and I'll talk more about what made that happen here shortly. But you can definitely see the timelines. You can put timestamps on these things and see where different parts of the pandemic were happening and what was going on. I won't bore you too much with this slide because it's a spreadsheets thing, but basically shows us, if you look at the far right column, 2020, the numbers in parentheses are the national number. The number, the not parentheses, is our local number. We ended the year at 55% occupancy. We'd been running just over 71% the 2 years prior. The other ones are kind of hotel specific in regard to revenue and whatnot. I won't drag you through that one right now. Okay, hold on here. Okay, this next slide. Sorry for the white screen. Oh. Okay, now we're going to look at it in terms of rooms sold. Okay, so there were 1.573 million rooms sold in 2019, and there were 7.5 million unique visitors. That's that map I showed you at the very beginning with all the glowing dots all around the country. Okay, 2020, that number became 1.16 million rooms sold. We go from 3.3 million hotel guests to 2.4 million, so almost a million gone. And we dropped down from 7.5 visitors to 4.37 million visitors unique throughout the year. Substantial drop there. So that's almost a 26% drop in room nights and a 42.3% drop in annual visitors. It's 3.2 million less visitors. And that leaves this little red box up here. There's our hole. There's our gap. Okay. And that's 407,000 rooms lost, about 51 million in direct hotel room nights. So I talked earlier about when we strip away the tourists and we can see the hole it leaves, there it is. So that's a hotel room occupancy average is 2.1 people. So it's about 855,000 people lost in the gap there. And it's about a third of Pierce County hotel guests from 2019. So very interesting to be able to pinpoint that. It gives us a real different perspective on what's going on. So here's some further notes here on these 2020 guests. So while the method of and logic for stripping away the tourist is pretty solid, there's a slight flaw in that some of the hotel traffic was replaced with what we call hyper-local stays. While the removed traveler view is accurate, to the benefit of the hotels, a small margin of that lost traveler business was replaced by locals. So there were multiple guest types that made up the Pierce County, that made our Pierce County hoteliers as successful as they were able to be. I'm careful with that word. I don't want to act like they were successful. It was a terrible, terrible year. But again, we definitely performed better than most. But some of those changes that helped fill in the gap, the things that helped prop us up, were supply infrastructure, so shipping, logistics, and consolidation. So being that we have as many price point hotels as close to I-5 as we do, as close to the port as we do, as close to other shipping logistics that are right there as we do, that went up. So moving all that toilet paper around that we were hoarding early on in the pandemic, that benefited us. We had a lot of trucking day stays. Military was up significantly. The National Guard activity here was considerably higher than usual, than most years, higher record cases in some instances, and that was felt in every hotel across the county as the Guard was deployed at different levels. Definitely a measurable uptick there. Housing market, real estate, sales and renovations, huge uptick, as you all have seen probably many times. Specifically, Pierce County has been doing great. Tacoma has been the #1 market on Redfin multiple times this year. And people were selling houses and staying in hotels during the gap, or renovating houses and staying in hotels. That's normal. That happens anyway, but it was happening at a measurable level this year. Medical, workforce in quarantine, so doctors and nurses moving around markets, staying in hotels, working longer shifts, more hours, not staying at home, staying in a hotel while they worked. There was a lot of that, and quarantine as well. People who were leaving the house to be separated from transmission risk, and doing that. Remote work was also a big uptick. Did I just freeze? Okay. Remote work was also a big uptick this year for various reasons. Some hotels were selling rooms by the day for people to literally work during the day and just get away from the house. And then the last one we call staycation, pop up, pent up, and walk up. The amount of people walking into hotels day of, not booking online, not picking up the phone, walking up to the front desk and saying, "Do you have a room tonight? I'm losing my mind. I gotta get out of the house." They're bringing their kids. They're looking for a swimming pool or a bed they don't have to make. They're doing DoorDash, and they don't want to clean the house, and they're just getting out. That also was a huge uptick as well. Again, things that exist normally, but they blossomed quite a bit during this last year, enough so to help fill some gaps that otherwise wouldn't have been filled. So what data is missing here? So short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, non-paid accommodations, travelers who stayed with friends or family, camping and RVs. That stuff is not quite tallied in there, but situational awareness and industry feedback tells us that the short-term rental sectors had ups and downs. Sectors that were closer to urban density were down. Sectors that were more rural or closer to natural attractions were exploding. In fact, this March, the cabin and VRBO markets around Mount Rainier are having a record year, to the point that they're demanding minimum 3-night stays. That has never, ever even come close to happening. So big changes there. Okay, so now what? So we got 2019 data as a benchmark for goals of recovery. We've got some immediate current goals. I'm trying to move fast here because I'm running over time. Our immediate priorities, again, back to group business, sports, youth, and adult. Our leisure market, there's a shift in our priorities there to invest more in that right now. And we're making some temporary adjustments. The marketing is more about inside of a 200-mile radius. So that's, we don't usually limit it, but drive markets are still king right now versus airline markets. Immediate and long-term, here's one of the things that makes these presentations hard. This data wasn't true 3 days ago, or it was truer 3 days ago than it is now. As Linda mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're about to see a rollback. We don't know how this is going to affect this, but we've been constantly rescheduling, booking, moving conventions and meetings. Some hot buzzwords we want to talk about: outdoor recreation, staycation, and pent-up demand. Those are words that get traded a lot in our lexicon. So I'm going to take you through a quick look at recovery. We've seen a significant surge of sports group business return starting in mid-February, the weekend of the snowstorm. all low risk categories, individual, no contact type outdoor sports, cross country, gymnastics, cheer, some collegiate baseball, and some limited football are a few examples. Indoors venues over 100,000 square feet. At the moment, as of this presentation, the second can host up to 600 people now, which includes our convention center. We'll find out Monday how that's going to change going forward, if it changes. Obviously, the moving target effect has been a huge challenge for all of us, you and I both. I can't think of a better example of that than this moment right now. This week, we're getting handed another moving platform, and it's frustrating. Leisure market opportunities are reopening with spring, outdoor and indoor markets both. Business travel is increasing, believe it or not, and drive market travel is increasing as well with the season. A quick look here, so you have a little bit of faith in the future. This is air traffic. TSA screenings are finally showing some recovery. Literally a week ago, they were still 50% down from year on year. Now we're back up to 63.8% of same week in 2019. So still a long way to go, but positive. The traveler screening continues to go up. Again, we like that data because it's gated, it's counted. Seats in planes and TSA screenings are a very hard metric. Last week, Delta Airlines had to cancel 75 flights because they didn't have enough staff. So they have announced that they're rehiring, bringing pilots and staff back in. So that's another good sign there. Also in the recovery here, looking at some similar data that I showed you earlier. This is visitors. This is not hotel data, but we've got 3 years to show you here what 2019 looked like, what 2020 looked like, and how 21 is looking so far. You can see that our weekly total of unique visitors coming from outside of 50 miles or out of state is still significantly lower than it should be, but it is showing, it is pointed the right direction as it's growing. We do expect that is going to shoot right back up. It's when we get, I think this next month is going to be extremely pivotal, but all the consumer confidence metrics continue to go up, especially with the vaccine as it continues to progress. So we expect that recovery to be very sharp when it goes. Hotel occupancy, again, I showed you this graph earlier as well. We can see the 3 years compared. We can see the graph, the blue line of 21 as we're monitoring in real time right now where we are in room nights. Oops, shoot. Sorry. And then this is same again. This is the Pierce County versus National. And this one takes us into 21. The big hard red line on the right is the year mark. And the thinner red line is when phase 3 was announced for us. Just so you can see some timestamps to see where the recovery curves, how they're kind of measuring against the timestamps of what's happening. This is just a quick snapshot for you, shared from the New York Times as of April 1st, so 8 days old. 8 days in COVID years, like dog years in COVID time, right? Everything changes in 8 days. But this is just a map to show how the country looks in terms of restrictions, business opening on the top left, mask requirements, and stay-at-home orders on the bottom screen. The stay-at-home orders is obviously the least talked about one at this point, but we can see the mask requirement. It's still following the population densities mostly, except of course, you got Texas and Florida in there. This is our problem, right? This was brought up at the beginning of the phone call. This is our local data. Pierce County, that circle is the problem. At the bottom of the screen there, for the state, we're rising 35% up through April 6th. If you saw the same headlines we all saw this morning, I'm sure, when you looked at the News Tribune, and then the content of that article and the chatter going on across all the communication channels is that next Monday we're going to have a problem. We're going to be rolling back. So when we get to the end of this thing, we say, what next? Well, this is as what next as we can answer at the moment. We still believe that April, this month, is pivotal in the narrative at large, but the reply is hazy. So we'll try again here soon. Thanks for listening. I apologize I ran a little long on that. I hope I didn't cut you off, Leslie. I'm going to unshare my screen. And thanks.
We've got plenty of time. Thank you. I I know that you had an awful lot of information to cover there, Dean. Do we have any questions of Dean? You know, it's optimistic, all right. Maybe not so much next week and in the very near future, but I guess the one thing that we can hold on to is the fact that the metrics will be revisited every 3 weeks. So all is not lost, but I think the one thing that I want to stress is that, you know, rolling back means, you know, when we hear government speak, it's, well, you're open, you know, 25%, you can open up to 25%. Well, that means 75% of a loss in business, in my opinion. So, you know, let's go ahead and continue to stay safe and be well, and let's hope that we can cross that threshold quickly and get onto a better life. And I'm counting on the summer months to be good for us, good to us. And I thank you, Dean, for all of your hard work. It's got to be frustrating as hell, you know, in trying to plan any events. And you know, I think that with short-term business, I mean, that's just kind of a given. But when you're out there and hustling for business for major amateur sporting events and convention business, got to be a little bit challenging.
Yeah, indeed it is. Indeed it is. By the way, I had a note in there. I just wanted to share with Lakewood specifically. You know, some of the I couldn't see the screen because I was having the slide problems, but the highest performance for us as an agency for what we do directly for Lakewood, we perform highest at the sports level. We book a lot of really big products in Forest Illicum. Yeah, you all might recall in December of 19, we had the U.S. National Championship from cycling, cyclocross there. That made almost 4,300 room nights. It was 7 days. People from 48 states were in Lakewood for that. So that's a banner for us in there. And then secondarily, from the travel and group side that's not sports, compression is our biggest piece for Lakewood. So we definitely put a lot of people in down there from maybe something neighboring. But that, you know, that we're always working side by side very closely with the city of Lakewood on development stuff, and we'll work on Summerfest. We did the triathlon. We're showing lots of other things on there. Excited about being able to get back in person for the oh my gosh, my brain, the Market Street, the pavilion. Help.
So you're talking about the Colonial Plaza.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, too much going on in my head. So we are optimistic, absolutely. And I guess, you know, the data I think looks pretty good right now too. We like data. We're not we don't guess. We use lasers. So
yes, very laser-like in your approach. And we especially appreciate the business during the shoulder season. Because we really could use a business, you know, in the fall and winter for sure. So keep up the good work, and once again, thank you. Looks like Judy has a question.
I do. So before the pandemic, we were looking at having like 3 new hotels all opening, launching at approximately the same time, and all competing. We're probably competing with the same employee pool with Point Reston, the Marriott Downtown, and the EQC Hotel. So what are you hearing from those places as far as staffing and availability? I mean, I just know as a business owner, I, you know, am struggling to even get people to apply for a position. So I'm just curious what you're hearing from hotels, and if they're, you know, if they're staffing up, what they're finding.
I'll be honest, it's a topic we haven't heard anything on. No one has raised any flags that it was. There's one hotel in the inventory that has a union situation. It's the only one that uses that, but that's a very different. That's different than what you're looking at there. But we haven't heard any issues from hoteliers with regard to that. It's all been mostly about the ability to plan. The amount of walk-in business it's been good, but it's troublesome because you can't plan for it. You don't have many, get a bunch of people walking up to the desk to buy a room and you haven't staffed for it. That's an issue. So there's been some some slinky problems with that, but otherwise we haven't heard. That's a good question though. I'll send that out and see if we get an echo on it, if anybody's talking about it, but organically it hasn't come up at all.
Any other questions? I don't see any movement.
I was just going to congratulate Dean. I heard yesterday you've got 117 teams signed up for the 70-48 race in June. So.
Yeah, actually, I think we're at about 130 now. So yeah, we're cranking.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Over 200 people for sure. The biggest year yet. So, thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, Dean, thank you again so much for taking time out to join us and provide us with the eagle's eye view of what's going on. And it's not nearly as I don't know, as bad as I thought. Looking at your numbers, I mean, it's certainly not anything to crow about, but when you start looking at the national average, something is positive, and people, maybe it's just the sense of being in the Pacific Northwest, and we have all this fresh air, and there's a lot of outdoor activities, and so people felt maybe a little bit more compelled to come out here rather than an urban type of a setting, perhaps.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. So last note, Trudy, I saw your note. Shoot me an email directly. You know how to get me. We'll talk about your question offline.
Good enough. Okay. Thanks again, Dean. Look forward to seeing you in the near future. Keep up the good work. Thanks. Okay. Well, next, I'd like to introduce Leslie Barstow. She is the Community Relations Manager, I believe, for the Port of Tacoma. And Leslie is going to provide us with a quick update on the Port of Tacoma sub-area plan.
I'm going to also share my screen real quick.
Okay.
This is very short, but I would like to flip through these slides real quick.
Yeah, we have time. No worries.
Is that there? Can you see it?
It is. Yes.
Okay, cool. So thank you for giving me a couple of minutes to just go through this. This slide deck was provided by the consultant working with the 5 different governments on the Tacoma Tide Flats sub-area plan that the city of Tacoma has initiated. And I just want to go through this real quickly so you understand what this means to business and why we need to hear from you. So this is a map that shows you kind of the area that they are looking at, which is the Tide Flats area. It's about 5,000 acres of land. Just as a reminder, the port owns about half of that land. So we own about 2,400 acres. That means there are hundreds of other companies down there on private property and some tribal land as well that the Puyallup tribe has in this area. A lot of workers and a lot of business and a lot of economic health of both Pierce County and sort of our bigger region depends on this area doing well. I can't really stress the interconnectedness of this area to the health of our region too much. It's very, very important. These are the goals of the project. So there's a list of the 5 governments that are sitting at the table. Interestingly enough, all 5 governments do not own property in the Tide Flats. But these are the people they considered stakeholders to bring to the table to have these conversations. This is going to be looking at how is land developed? How is it regulated? What types of things does the city want to pursue putting in and approving in that area. And ultimately, this plan will be approved by the Tacoma City Council. They are the regulatory agency for land use and all of the other things that you think about when you think about running a business. They've held a series of visioning small meetings that have gone through all these topics, and you're going to see a slide with a whole bunch of dates on it that have mostly passed because all these have pretty much been done. But right now, they've just released a survey. We have until the end of April to have people complete that survey. And if there's anything I can beg you to do at the end of this, is please, I will give Linda the link and then I will put it in the chat too. Please complete the survey, because I can guarantee you that the folks who are expressing their thoughts on this right now are not necessarily business friendly. They're saying things like, you know, this area should be a dog park, or it should have restaurants and look like Reston. And there's a lot at stake here. The types of things that are going to come out of this that the city can do involve the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, the Growth Management Act, the Shoreline Management Act, the Puyallup Land Claims Settlement, and the container port element, and also the certification that this area now has, which is designated as a MIC, a manufacturing and industrial center. All of that could go away if people don't want it to be a place for business any longer. These are the main questions that they're trying to get input on. There are many more questions in the actual survey, but these are kind of the three big buckets of what they're trying to get people to weigh in on. And again, I'm sure that you can guess there are a lot of people who are weighing in who don't quite get the fact that this area needs to be healthy and thriving for our entire region to be healthy. So here's my list of dates that mostly passed. They did these visioning meetings pretty much all through March, and then kind of the report outs coming up in May. So really all that's left at the moment where you can have some input is, this is a little screenshot I took of the survey landing page. If you look at the top here, those same buckets that they did the visioning meetings on are up here at the top, and there's some information about each of those if you click on those. But then over here's the survey. And again, I just encourage everybody to please take it, and let's let business voices be heard so that they can get a little bit better idea of how what they decide here is going to affect our region. And I'm just going to give you a quick example. One of the comments has been, well, we shouldn't allow chemical manufacturing in the tide flats. And on the surface of that, that sounds good. Like, who wouldn't agree with that? But that actually would apply to businesses like Concrete Technologies, who's been making bridges, and they did the monorail and all kinds of big things out of cement for almost 100 years in the tide flats. That could cease to let them operate because of how chemical is defined. So it's really important to understand sort of those subtleties and what's at stake. And that's it. That's the end of the slides. I can delete this and I'll give you the link. But I please everybody just do a weigh in and take the survey, and let's make sure some business voices are actually heard in the mix.
Good enough. Okay. Any questions of Leslie?
Yes, this is Herb Stumpf. I have a question for Leslie. I noticed that it's a Tacoma Comprehensive Plan, and you've got City of Fife, the port, and other agencies involved, as well as the tribe. Because of its size, is Tacoma the lead agency amongst the group of agencies?
Correct. This is a plan.
So the lead agency.
By them,
All right.
yes.
All right. And my second question is, amongst the various components of the area, the various components that you had outlined, there's an indication about the environmental impact statement. With the environmental problems from the past, will this be a obstacle to get a consensus?
Oh, I think there are going to be a lot of obstacles to getting 5 governments to agree to anything. I think part of the picture that complicates this is, yeah, there's a legacy of some poor land management, I'll call it that, and some contamination issues down there in that area. But again, there are hundreds of these companies that are private that are not, that are subject to sort of their own regulations based upon whatever their business is. So whether or not those are sufficient at this time to regulate how they do their business is probably one of those big questions that's on the table here.
On a personal note, I wouldn't want to be the one trying to coordinate all the various groups with their individual
Agendas, might be a good word.
agendas, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's, I'm glad everybody's talking. Hopefully, everybody's gets on the same sheet of music, and there has to be some give and take on everybody's part.
Yeah, I mean, for us, most of our land is in the docks where the ships actually come in and out. We have some land that has warehouses on them, and we have our habitat areas that are down there. So from the port's standpoint, unless they remove the MIC designation for the area, maybe some of this wouldn't hurt us, quote, directly. But the health of all those other businesses that are all interconnected as far as keeping our region going. And right now, I've got to say, this has become more connected than it's ever been. And a lot of that's been going through the pandemic, and people are ordering things from home, and warehouses are popping up everywhere because we're all buying things. And we're seeing the cargo fluxes surge. And now you're talking about trucking companies and all of the things that are associated with all of that commerce. And depending on how those regulations get changed, some of those businesses could very well be in jeopardy. And so there's some real concerns. I agree with you. I'm glad I'm not the one trying to monitor this thing. There are 2 representatives from each government who are literally sitting at a table together trying to kind of hash these things out. But all of this input right now that they're collecting is going to get fed into those conversations. So that's why I'm just encouraging the business communities to really help feed that conversation. And you'll see from the questions in the survey, a lot of the questions were generated from things that they heard in those visioning centers. I think there's one in there about, people wanting to go clamming down there. And there's things in there that I don't think are particularly viable, but they're in there because they heard somebody say it, and they're kind of regurgitating that into the survey. So again, please just take it and add your comments, and let's get maybe some balance in sort of the comments that they hear.
Well, you have a group of communities and businesses involved that each has their own agenda and with a interest of their own, own agenda, as I say. But we have to remember that you, as a port activity, are an economic driver for not just the port, but also for the Pierce County area.
Yeah, for the region.
And
for the region.
for the region, exactly. And the other thing is, with all your entities putting together, they have to remember you need compliance with the Growth Management Act, the GMA, and that's going to be where people have to give and take.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm not trying to monopolize the conversation. I'll let others take over now. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I really, right now, just because they put a deadline on this, that you only have till the end of April to do the survey, kind of trying to just get, the consultant who put this together is kind of charged each of the 5 governments with go out and let people know the status and where we're at right now and encourage them to participate. So that's where we're at. We're trying to just get everybody to understand. You've got pretty much the next month before I think they'll be done at this point in collecting feedback from citizens in the business community. And then the 5 governments will be sitting there hashing through all that material.
Yeah.
Leslie, I understand that, you can't have everyone at the table. I get that. However, have you reached out to all of the other cities in our region to get their feedback and input as well, to somehow add to the discussion? Obviously here in Lakewood, you look at, we have tons of industrial parks where we're growing by leaps and bounds as far as, warehousing and whatnot.
Thanks to Becky.
Yes, yes. Becky.
Yeah, so
She's a hard worker. There's no doubt about that.
yeah, and to answer the question, so the government affairs with the local regional cities is not in my purview, so I'm not entirely sure how much work has been done to reach out to them, but I believe there's definitely been some, because again, at this point, we want as many voices as possible weighing in. And again, because you can probably guess that this has been set up with, the Sierra Club of Seattle is going to weigh. There are agencies that are being sucked in from outside even our region to throw their comments into the mix. So it would be really nice if the people in the immediate Pierce County area actually had a say.
Yeah, hopefully that's all taken with a grain of salt.
I hope so, but I have no idea.
So when you talk about balance, what is it? 3 to 1? Is it 4 to 1?
Well, I don't know. The visioning meetings, the way they set them up, they were fairly balanced. They had a community representative, they had some subject matter experts. They really tried to create sort of a team of people to all sort of engage in the conversation. But how many of those people have engaged, again, sort of outside forces to influence things, I have no idea. At this point, all we can do is say, well, hopefully it's somewhat equally balanced with other voices.
Well, I hope that this, feedback is critical. I understand that, and input is important. There's no doubt about that. I just, I hope that whoever is making the final decisions, that they're not going to be completely swayed by just that input alone. There's a little bit of a reality check, I think, that people are going to have to take a look at as well. So.
Yeah, and I got asked.
We'll get the word out, and I'll put it in our next newsletter before the end of the week. And
Thank you, appreciate it.
And I'm going to go ahead and send a quick email off to you too, Leslie, just for some guidance on what we want to do as far as presenting this. I just want to ask you a question. How detailed and how much of an expert do you have to be to know about, is it a general kind of a questionnaire that you're putting out there?
Yeah.
Because I am certainly not an expert in
No, basically it's
chemical pollutants and,
it's pretty general. The questions are pretty easy to answer. And again, I think it's just if you think the jobs that go along with that economic activity are important, then you need to just speak up and say jobs are important. So it's pretty basic in that regard.
They're multiple choice, so it's not open-ended questions.
Did you already do it, Judy?
Yes, I did.
Yay, Judy! Woo-hoo!
So, yeah,
You do it while we were talking, did you?
No, she's been on the speaking circuit for a couple of weeks, so I saw her a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. So Judy, how long did it take you?
They are multiple choice, so it's not
10
like
minutes, maybe.
10 minutes?
I've taken it to probably 10 minutes. I heard Leslie speak at Transportation Club when I was Judy's guest. So
Okay,
it's
okay,
easy, multiple choice, pick your top 3 or put in your own answers.
okay, okay.
Yeah, and there is room to write in comments. And again, if you feel moved to do that or something triggers something in your mind as you're going
When you
through
feel
it,
like clamming.
go for it. Yeah. Well, and you know, I will just tell you, I raised some questions about the survey when I first saw it, because there are some things on there that I think are ridiculous to have even, why ask the question if it can't happen?
Right.
That was
Right.
one of the questions that I asked the consultant. I said, why is that even in there?
Hmm.
Because that makes it seem as if it is a viable option by putting it in a survey. And her comment back to me was, well, that was one of the ones that the tribe wanted in there, which is, again, a little comical, because no matter what the city does, none of the regulations that they create are going to affect the tribe at all, because they're a sovereign nation. They can do whatever they want on their property. So none of the outcome will affect them at all. But again, this is all an act of hearing everybody's voices and trying to understand how this best can work together.
Well.
Yeah.
keeping our fingers crossed. And like I said, I'll reach out to you with an email, because I have a question or two to
Sure.
ask you. And yes, there is a little window of time. So if you guys can click onto that link, and if you can't do it right now, do it during
And
your
please
next
share
break.
it with, your
Yeah.
other companies, coworkers, whatever. Just the more voices we get in at this moment, the better. So that's just, I'm just trying to encourage everybody to spread the word.
Well, I think we all know someone that works at the port, right? I mean, just like we know somebody that's a JBLM that works at JBLM. So,
Sure.
if they're not in the military, somebody that is affiliated. So we need to make sure that we protect very, very crucial part of our economy. And and oftentimes I don't think that people think about the port that way. It's just kind of there, unless you're directly affiliated with it, impacted by it.
Yeah, and
It hasn't caused any problems, so everyone just kind of goes along their merry way, and I don't think that people really think about the port as crucial to our economic development in our area as they should.
I think the last number I saw from, which was like 2018, was that there were 42,000 jobs directly attributed to the work that goes on down there every day. So
Significant.
that's a big number.
Yes. It's the size of some of our cities, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you letting me have a little time.
Thank you, Leslie. Nice job. Easy to understand. I like that.
And Leslie, I'll just say thank you too, because I wasn't trying to put you on a spot. I just say it's going to be a difficult, time-consuming process, but I think it's important that everybody be at the table and come to a consensus.
Oh, I
So,
couldn't agree with
thank
you
you.
more. That's where we're at. Yep.
Excellent. Okay, well, Rankin Sadler sponsored our meeting today. Unfortunately, Joshua Peters, who is the chamber rep, couldn't be here. He's got all kinds of things going on right now. Being a CPA, you can imagine he's a bit overwhelmed. So he just wanted me to let everyone know that he's sorry he missed you, and hopes that you got some great information, and I think we all did. The one thing that he did want to mention is that filing for individuals has been pushed back to May 17th. So you got a little bit of time if you haven't already filed, okay? So on that note, I am going to wish everyone well, unless you have a comment or an announcement to make. No? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.